Thank you again for this opportunity, and it seems to be a little scary for the things that are going on around us, but we can get a handle on it. You know, the only things to be afraid of are the things we can't understand. And we can understand this, and we can do something about it. So cancer, it is a plague that is going around the world, especially in the industrial nations. And at this point, it's number 2 as far as the cause of death in the United States. But it will soon be number 1. Heart disease is coming down a little bit, but cancer's on the rise up. Again, what do we want? We want greater health for greater happiness, strength to endure stress, energy for the day, tranquility of life, and joy. Hard to find unless you have good health. These are the laws, again, that govern. These are immutable laws. Immutable means unchangeable. These laws are what govern our being. They don't change whether whether you're old or young, male, female, white or black, tall or short. No external circumstance will change how these laws affect humanity. So it'd be well for you to get familiar with these things. If you're ill or you're not feeling well, generally you can go and just sit down and look at these laws of health and ask yourself, am I getting exercise, or have I not been doing that lately? Have I not been eating just right? Am I drinking enough water? You can look at these things and generally find why you're not feeling well. So here again, the deadly afflictions from the United States, and cancer is number 2. Just a reminder of from the previous show that we shared with you on heart disease. We looked at epigenetics. And epigenetics is the study of the genes, the little switches that turn on or turn off our genes. We are not destined to follow in the same footsteps as our predecessors, our family. Just because my father died of leukemia doesn't mean I need to die of leukemia. And it's lifestyle. The lifestyles are what turns on or turn off our gene history. So, again, these are the factors, and you can see that a lot of them are lifestyle. In fact, the number one or number 2 factor that causes death is tobacco and diet and exercise. So these are things we can change. Alcohol, we can stop drinking alcohol. Microbial agents, toxic agents, motor vehicle crashes are not things that we have a lot of control over, but if our immune system is up, of course we can try to keep ourselves from exposure to toxic agents. Prescription drugs, there's something we can certainly get a handle on. And this is the proper use of prescription drugs. Suicide, firearms, and homicide.
Near the beginning of the 20th century, Americans each ate about 120 pounds of meat annually. By 2007, that figure had exploded to no less than 222 pounds. In 1913, we ate about 40 pounds of processed sugar each per year. However, by 1999, our consumption of all refined sweeteners had risen to over 147 pounds. In 1909, Americans consumed around 294 pounds of dairy products apiece. But by 2006, our yearly intake of dairy had more than doubled to 605 pounds.
So certainly here's something that has changed in our society, lifestyle, and that's the consumption of meat, sugar, and dairy products. Here is the chances of death rates per from the different diseases. As you can see, heart disease, the red is 1950, the blue is 2002. As you can see, it's coming down, cardiovascular disease coming down, pneumonia, flu coming down. But cancer, actually, it's on the rise. Here is the overall chances of dying from cancer. These are the main causes, the main afflictions of cancer. Lung and bronchioles, both in men and female. Prostate for men is the number one, besides lung and bronchial, and breast for women. Then it goes on, and they're pretty much close to the same. Colon, leukemia, pancreatic, liver, so on and so forth. Again, by ethnicity, by race, the white race compared to the African American race or black race, they have the highest incidence of cancer as any other race. And why would that be? Well, it has to be somehow lifestyle related. All sites, if you're a man, you have a 1 in 2 chance of dying from cancer. So that's a 50% chance of dying from cancer. If you're a woman, you have a 1 in 3 or a 33% chance of dying from cancer. If you're average. So here are the factors. Diet is the number one factor for cancer and causing cancer, 60%. Tobacco, 30%. So if you got a hold of and change your lifestyle as far as diet and exercise and tobacco, you've pretty much lowered your risk from cancer to virtually 10%. Then alcohol, radiation, pollution, and medications are the next factors. So every 30 seconds, one American is diagnosed with cancer. Every 55 seconds, one American dies. That's 1,400 people a day. Do you remember how many people died of heart disease every day? 2,600. 2,600 per day. And 1,400 people die per day from cancer. So 4,000 people die every single day in the United States, about 2.5 million people per year, of heart disease or cancer. This year, 145,000 women will learn that they have breast cancer. Almost 1/3 of men who died this year will die of colon or prostate cancer. So here's a very interesting study looking at the Japanese, the generation that lived in Japan, and then the second generation of those that had moved to Hawaii. Now, and then compared that to the Caucasians from Hawaii, looking at their cancer rates. So if you look at, in Japan, colon cancer per 100,000 people is 78 people per 100,000. But the second generations of the Hawaiians in Hawaii jumped to 371, which is higher than the Caucasians of Hawaii. So what was it that changed? Well, it's like every other immigrants. When they move to some place, their kids start adapting the life of the place that they live. So they adopted the lifestyle of the Caucasians of Hawaii and therefore had the same diseases. Now, there's a little bit of difference, but the only real significant difference is stomach cancer. So stomach cancer in Japan is high, 1,331 per 100,000. It's because of the very salty foods. Heavy salted foods are very hard on the stomach. And they like some of the aged salted foods. So cancer's on the rise. Here's from basically 1939 to 1999. We see a direct rise in the amount of cancer per individuals. So if we're saying that lifestyle has a great factor in this, we should find something in society that rose approximately the same way. And what do we find? Here's the consumption of fat over almost the same year span. And you will see that there is a direct relationship with the consumption of fat and cancer. Again, those members of the fat family, all of the vegetable fats, Cancer in children. Cancer is the number two cause of death in children. Accidents is number one. And leukemia, which is cancer of the blood, is the leading cause of childhood cancer deaths. I want you to keep that in mind because we're going to refer to it a little later on in our study here. So meat increases colon cancer risks. They took individuals, studied them. Again, this is a large study of individuals. So those that ate less than once per month of red meat, which is beef, pork, or lamb, had a 0% chance or 0% increase in risk of colon cancer. But if they jumped to once per month, 2 months per week, it jumped 39%. 2 to 4 times per week, 50. 5 to 6 times per week, 84. And if they ate red meat daily or more, they had 149% greater risk of colon cancer. Here's cancer viruses. The highest cancer rates are in dairy farmers and poultry farmers who market eggs. In 1975, 7 in 10 cartons had cancer viruses in it of milk, and more than 30 human diseases are traced to cow's milk. In 1975, 7 in 10 eggs had cancer viruses. In 1985, 100% of the eggs had cancer viruses in them. So here's a correlation, studies done with the correlation between meat, dairy servings per week and breast cancer. So we look at how many times per week these products were used and their risks. So frequency, how many times per week, meat, eggs, or cheese. So if they ate meat, egg, or cheese less than once per week, then they had basically a risk factor of 1. But if they ate it 2 to 4 times per week, the risk factor jumped almost double with eggs and triple with cheese and almost triple or 2.5 times with meat. So if they ate it daily, 3.5 times the risk factor jumped 3.5 times with meat, almost 3 times with eggs, and 4 times with cheese. So there is a direct relationship with the consumption of animal products and cancer. Here's a very interesting report. Researchers warn of cancer risk in dairy products. So as reported in a January 23, 1998 article in Science, men with high blood levels of the natural occurring hormone called insulin-like growth factor, or IGF-1, are over 4 times more likely to develop full-blown prostate cancer than are men with lower levels. So if a man has, we produce this hormone, it's a growth hormone, but if someone is producing that hormone too much, then a man has a greater risk of prostate cancer. Now, the 1998 report appears unaware of the fact that the entire U.S. population is now exposed to high levels of IGF-1 and dairy products. So, the Food and Drug Administration approved the sale of unlabeled milk from cows injected with Monsanto's genetically engineered bovine growth hormone, the RBGH milk, and it's supercharged with high levels of normal potent IGF-1 up to 10 times, and these levels that naturally occur, and they're 10 times more potent than the natural IGF in a human body. So basically what this is telling us, if a man is drinking milk regularly, he is going to have prostate cancer. There's no avoidance because he's giving 10 times more IGF-1, and that IGF-1 is 10 times more potent than what's naturally produced in our body.
And finally, the biggest people. America has now become the fattest nation in the world. Congratulations. Nearly 100 million Americans are today either overweight or obese. That's more than 60% of all U.S. adults. Since 1980, the total number of overweight and obese Americans has doubled, with twice as many overweight children and 3 times as many overweight adolescents. The fattest state in America? Mississippi, where 1 in 4 people are obese. Obesity is now second only to smoking as a major cause of preventable death in America, with more than 400,000 deaths per year associated with related illnesses.
So, you know, there's no disease known related with being too skinny. But there are many related with being too heavy. Here is what's happening to the youth in the United States. Here we have the scale. The first group is from 2 to 5 years, the next group 6 to 11 years, and the last group 12 to 19 years old. The colors, the blue is from 1971 to 74, the red is from 76 to 80, and the green is from 88 to 94, and the gold is from 99 to 2000. So as you can see, in each age group, what is the tendency for obesity or overweight? It is increasing continually. So we go back to look and see what was increasing in our society along with for cancer was consumption of fat. So also it's making our children obese. The heavier you are, the greater your risk.
Fast foods are a major contributor to this epidemic.
In 2000, Dr. David Satcher became the first Surgeon General to draw attention to the obesity crisis, declaring it a national epidemic.
Now remember, we're supersizing everything. Left unabated, obesity would overtake smoking as the leading preventable cause of death in this country. One of the most disturbing things to me is that in the last 20 to 25 years, we've actually seen a doubling of overweight and obese children and adolescents.
A doubling of overweight children and adolescents. So on any given day, there's 29% of men and 44% of women are trying to lose weight. A $33 billion commercial diet industry. Good money. So from 1986 to 2000, the prevalence of Americans with a body mass of 40 or above, that's 100 pounds overweight, quadrupled. From 1 in 200 to 1 in 50. Those are dangerous statistics. If you look here, that your obesity and increased risk of death from cancer. The greater your obesity, the greater your risk of death from cancer. If you're 40% or above, your body mass index is 40 or above, you've jumped 33% higher risk of death if you're a male and a 55% if you're a female. Now let's look at BMI, okay? The BMI is your body mass index. So you can tell how much you're overweight by your BMI. So if you look on the left, these are in inches. This is going to be, my scale's a little off here, but I am 74 inches tall, all right? I am around 186 in weight. So if I take 74 inches, go over in my scale to the right to 186, then go to the top, my body mass index is 24. So look at your height, look at your weight, and then see what your body mass index is. So 5 foot tall, you would be 60 inches. So if you're 5'5", you would be 65 inches. If you're 5'8", you'd be 68 inches. Then go over and look at your weight, then go to the top and look at your BMI. So does everybody have it? Okay. So here is your risks associated with your BMI. If you are 18.5 or less, you're considered underweight. Still, no associated disease with it. If you're 18.5 to 24.9, you're considered normal. Again, no diseases associated with it. If you're 25 to 29.9, you're considered overweight. You have an increased risk. And if your waistline is 40 or more, you have a much higher risk of disease. Again, 30 to 34.9 and 35 to 39.9, you're considered obese, and it's either high or very high, your risk of disease. And if you're over 40, you're extremely obese, and you're extremely high risk of disease.
Psychologist and author Dr. Doug Lyle, the consumption of unnaturally dense foods is the main cause for the epidemic of obesity in America.
It isn't that people become more self-indulgent. It isn't because they're lazier than they ever were. What's happening is that their mechanisms of satiation are being fooled.
The process starts with a range of receptors in our stomachs that help us gauge how much food we've eaten. These include stretch receptors to help measure the sheer volume of food in our stomachs. We also have density receptors to help determine the caloric density, or what we more commonly call the richness of our food. For instance, 500 calories of natural plant food fills the stomach completely, triggering both our stretch and density receptors to signal our brain that we've had enough to eat. But 500 calories of unnaturally rich or processed food fills the stomach far less, deceiving these receptors into telling our brain that we need to eat more. Even worse is 500 calories of oil, which is almost pure fat, and barely triggers any response at all.
The problem with weight management in humans is that if you make these foods completely artificial, which we do today, you wind up with a problem that people have to overeat just to be satisfied.
So people have to overeat just to be satisfied because there is no nutritional value in the food eaten. It's vacant calories. So here is a study done. Actually, it was a report done by U.S. News and World Report, and it was the outbreak of mad cow disease in Europe. And so they were wondering, they found out that the reason the cows in Europe got the mad cow disease, or the spongiform brain, was because they were feeding them sheep. They were feeding them byproducts from the slaughterhouse. And the sheep had a disease called scrapies, a protein disease that when the cows eat it, which were normal vegetarians, then they got that disease, which we call mad cow disease. So they were interested, well, what are they feeding the cows in the United States? So this is what they found out. They were feeding them cats, dogs, and manure. They were taking animals from like Los Angeles and so forth, in the cities that have an enormous amount of animals that they euthanize, that they kill, and they're cooking them and drying them and grinding them up and feeding them. They were feeding them newspaper, they're feeding them worms, they're feeding them all kinds of things to what they call pre-digested protein to the cattle to see if they can find a cheap source of feeding them to getting them fat. And one of the best ways and cheapest sources is manure. This is Lamar Carter. He's a farmer from Arkansas. He feeds his 800 cattle a chicken manure and soybean bran mix. So they take chicken manure, they compost it, and then they dry it, and then they feed it back to the cows, and they call it pre-digested protein. Very common practice. You'll find it in your dog food and some other places, wherever it lists it as pre-digested protein. That's what it is. I gave this presentation in California, and a lady came the next day, and she looked tired. She says, I couldn't sleep all night long. She said, from what you showed me, she said, I went and I called my vet, and I talked to my vet, and my vet said the same thing, and then she gave me some foods, some dog foods and cat foods I could buy that didn't have it in it, and I went out and I bought them, and then she says, I was coming home, and she said, I've been so concerned of what I'm going to feed my dog and a cat, and I didn't think about myself at all. Okay, potential dangers of the bovine leukemia virus. Now, do you remember what the second cause of death for children was? It was leukemia. Okay? Number one cause is accidents. In the bovine leukemia virus, the BLV virus, is present in up to 70% of the U.S. dairy cattle. It can cause a disease called bovine lymphosarcoma, or it's a cancer of the lymph system. The BLV infected cows release infectious viruses or infected lymphocytes in their milk. Do you know what a lymphocyte is? That's a pus cell. The common name, we call it, would be a pus cell. So milk has something for everybody. This is Dr. John McDougall says, there is one thing that dairy products have more than any other food I can think of. It's contamination. Milk. This is what the advertising label now is, milk has something for everybody. They were sued by the United States government for false advertising. Unheard of before, because they used to have the labels, everybody needs milk. And the United States government sued the Dairy Association for false advertising because everybody doesn't need milk. So it says milk has something for everybody. And Dr. McDougall agrees, and it's contamination. It is one of the filthiest things on the market, is dairy products. Now, this is a study done. It's called, they looked at the adult population of these different countries, about 13 countries, and they looked at lactose sufficiency in adulthood. So what this is you normally lose your renin enzyme when you're a child, by the time you're about 4 years old, unless you are continuing to give in milk to drink. So after 4 years old, if your mothers and fathers continue to give you dairy products and milk to drink, your body would be forced to continue to process that enzyme. So they looked at individuals that have drank milk all of their life by their lactose sufficiency. So they found that the more the population that drank milk continually, the higher the rates of breast cancer. So this study was also done in the United States, and it was done state by state. And they found that the state that consumed more of the dairy products, the higher the rate of breast cancer. So bacteria in milk, the U.S. Public Health Service regulation. Milk after pasteurization should contain no more than 20,000 bacteria per milliliter of milk and no more than 10 chloroform bacteria per milliliter. So how small is a milliliter? 1/1000th of a liter, right? So let's make a 16-ounce glass of milk, shall we? And see how contaminated that milk can be and still considered safe by the United States government. That would be 5 million bacteria and 2,500 chloroform bacteria per glass of milk. And they still say that's safe. It is the filthiest food product on the market. I had a gentleman I took care of in the late 1970s, and he had cancer growth on the spine, and they'd used radiation. They paralyzed him, burnt his spine with radiation. But he was the head of the creameries for the state of Oklahoma. The creameries is where they bring all the milk, and then they separate it for the cream and make cheese and do all that stuff. Okay, so he's head of all of the creameries in the state of Oklahoma. He told me it's the filthiest product on the market then. He said it would come in so full of bacteria that they were allowed to put so much lime in the milk to sweeten it, because the waste product of a bacteria is very acid. So their poop in the milk makes the milk so acid they have to put lime in it. And he says it's so full of bacteria that they can't get it to coagulate as it should. So they're allowed to put so much plaster of Paris in cottage cheese. Do you know what plaster of Paris is? It's what you make a cast out of, you know, that old hard cast if you broke your arm. They're allowed to put so much plaster of Paris in cottage cheese to make it firm up. So what would that do for your colon? Because that's where you absorb all the moisture out. You're going to make a cast in your colon.
Cornell University, investigating what he discovered in the Philippines.
Alec Willard, from the beginning, was designed in a sense to do two main things. One, I wanted to replicate, if possible, the Indian work, because it was so provocative. Secondly, if this is really true, I wanted to study mechanisms of work.
Just like the Indian researchers, Campbell fed half the rats in his study a diet of 20% casein, the main protein in dairy products. The other half was fed only 5% casein. Over the 12 weeks of the study, the rats eating the higher protein diet had a greatly enhanced level of early liver cancer tumor growth. On the other hand, all of the rats eating only 5% protein had no evidence of cancer whatsoever. But Dr. Campbell decided to take these findings a step further. This time, instead of keeping his test rats on the same diet throughout the study, he kept them in one group and switched their diets back and forth between 5 and 20% dairy protein, doing so at 3-week intervals. The results were astonishing. Whenever the rats were fed 20% protein, early liver tumor growth exploded. But when the same rats were given 5% protein, tumor growth actually went down.
I mean, this is a simple plot of this information. We could turn on and turn off cancer growth.
Could turn on or turn off cancer growth with the use of protein from milk. Turn on or turn off cancer growth. So this is a lot of vegetarians think cheese is all right because it's vegetarian. But is it? And one individual wrote the Kraft food company in the United States and asked them about their cheese product, whether it was vegetarian. So it says, thank you very much for asking if Kraft cheese products contain any animal derivatives. Our comments here apply only to products produced in the United States. Many cheese products produced in the United States do contain a coagulating enzyme derived either from beef or swine. The most common method of coagulating milk is by the use of an enzyme preparation, rennet, which traditionally was made from the stomachs of veal calves. Since the consumption of calves for veal has not kept pace with the demand for rennet, in the preparation of cheese, a distinct shortage of enzymes has developed. A veal calf was a calf taken from the mother at birth, put in a cage, basically a cage just big enough for it to stand in, and it's not allowed to exercise, and it's fed only milk. So its meat becomes very tender, very white, and that was considered veal. But since they're only drinking milk, then their stomachs would have a higher rennet enzyme. But the problem is because of the environmental movements and the treatment of animals, the consumption of veal has gone way down. So they have a shortage of rennet to make cheese. So what did they do? Consequently, a few years ago, it became a common practice to mix the rennet extract from calf stomachs with a pepsin enzyme derived primarily from the stomachs of swine. Okay, cheese. Americans eat an average of 30 pounds a year. The FDA allows 750 million pus cells in every 2 pounds of milk. It takes 10 pounds of milk to make 1 pound of cheese. That's 7.5 billion pus cells per 1 pound of cheese. If 1 pound of cheese is sliced into 16 slices, that's 468 million pus cells per slice. 80% of the protein in milk consists of casein. Casein is the glue that holds the label to the bottle or the glue that holds furniture together. What does that do? Well, you glue your intestinal tract too. Constipation. All right, if you're concerned about calcium, a lot of people say, well, you got to drink milk to get calcium. Well, this afternoon we're going to do a presentation on dairy, this afternoon at 4, and we're going to look at it again. But if you look, where does a cow get calcium? Does a cow drink other cows' milk so it could get more calcium? Well, no, it eats grass. Yeah, the source of minerals that you need to get need to come through vegetation. And if you look here, whole milk is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from the bottom of this list. And lamb's quarters, I'm not sure if you're familiar with lamb's quarters, it's a weed, grows all in the south. So far, every country I've been in, I've seen lamb's quarters. It looks a little different in each country. But it is the highest in vitamin A in the vegetable kingdom and the highest in calcium. So here's that carob flower again, very high in calcium. Collard greens, all of these are higher per cup than non-fat milk, amaranth grain, and whole milk. Figs, again, just 10 figs has almost as much calcium as whole milk. The problem with the calcium in milk is that it's not absorbable. It's not usable by our intestinal tract. We'll get rid of up to 70% or more of the calcium. We can't use it. We excrete it out. So then we cause the product to become high in protein and low in calcium. So some advice from a cow: eat broccoli. So this is, of course, taken off the commercials that chicken commercials on the billboards you see where the cows are up there and say, eat chicken. So osteoporosis is a disease caused by various factors, one of the most important one being excess protein intake. In virtually every study conducted, the evidence has been conclusive. The higher the protein intake, the more calcium is lost. Thank you.